In this episode, we talk about brown joy. I've been searching for it for a while now, brown joy. Through this podcast, the books I read, and the stories I listen to, some days I catch glimpses. In conversations about childhood, in memories of home-cooked food, there is joy. In the way we reminisce about weddings and festivals, I get glimpses of this brown joy. But it often feels elusive. It feels covered by a dusting of negativity, slightly dimmed and often erased. And yet I keep looking. Today's guest is the woman who first introduced me to this phrase, brown joy. She says that brown joy is a radical act. And it was this quote that first drew me to her. Welcome to The Brown Box, a podcast which explores the lives and stories of brown women right here in Singapore. Today's guest is Sindhu Kalidas, a theatre actress and a dramaturg. Don't worry, we'll be unpacking the meaning of that word. This is a conversation, yes, about brown joy and the search for it, but also a conversation about the absence of joy and what rushes in to fill those spaces. It's about the pressing demands of race, identity, and belonging that sometimes consume all the energy in the room and leave very little space for joy. Our conversation begins with Sindhura's first steps into acting.
I was 6 years old when my sister moved overseas to study. Because I was very close to her, I think that I turned to acting out of pure loneliness as a form of escape. I used to watch this kids' TV show every Saturday at 9 a.m. and it was called Hippo and Friends, basically Singapore's answer to Barney and Friends. I noticed that at the end of the show, there was an audition notice and it said, "Do you want to be one of Hippo's friends? Come and audition for us." I turned to my mother and I said, "Hey, can I go for the audition?" Thankfully, my mother thought it was a good idea, probably because she had this grumpy, surly child crying all the time, sitting at home, and she's probably cracking her head thinking, "Oh my God, what can I do?" And finally, I'd expressed interest in wanting to try something and do something. So she brought me to this audition and I got the role. It was really nice to just take a break from real life. And it wasn't that I was playing somebody else, I was still playing me. I had to learn lines, I had a character. There was Hippo's friend version of me that existed in the world. Hippo had all sorts of friends. Young Malay girls, young Malay boys, everybody. Chinese, Malay, Eurasian, and I was one of them. Every episode, it'll be new kids for that particular episode, but there's always like a sort of learning point for each episode.
I didn't grow up watching Hippo and Friends, so I Googled a few episodes. There aren't that many out there, but what I found was sweet. A big, very purple hippo, and kids of all races, side by side, smiling, singing, learning little lessons about kindness and harmony. It makes the world look bright, Hippo and Friends does. Simple, safe. But through the conversations I've had here on the podcast, I've learned something important. That harmony which they showed on screen wasn't always what played out on the playground. Racial bullying, name-calling, especially towards minority kids, was still very real. The intention was honest, but the lived reality was messier. So I asked Sindhu, what was it like to be a child actor back then, an Indian child actor? Was it competitive? Did she feel safe?
My mum was always there with me. Now that I'm thinking back on it, she would sit there with me for 6-7 hour shoots and she would make sure that I had a snack. If I felt uncomfortable doing things, I always knew that I could go and tell her. Or she could notice if something was not right and she'd just be like, "Hey, sorry, can I just have a word with Sindhu?" And she'd be, "You okay? Everything all right? Are you tired? What's happening?" I remember there was like this one episode where I had to hug a male friend. And I remember talking to my mom about this. She said, "Are you comfortable doing it? If you're not comfortable, you don't have to do it. We can make it a handshake or a high five or something like that."
Sindhu's response makes me really happy. It feels like this really was a different time, a more innocent one, something that becomes even clearer in the next story Sindhu shares.
Back then, there was no email, right? So we had to go to TCS. Back then, before MediaCorp was MediaCorp, it was Television Corporation of Singapore. We'd have to walk into the main office and there'd be a little tray with the script in the envelope and you'd have to look for your name, pick it up. My mom would bring it back home and help me learn my lines. It actually taught me a lot of early values that I still hold on to today. Be on time to things, because if you're late, you're wasting other people's time. Be prepared when you're going for something, especially if you're being paid for it. Just be a decent person, because nobody wants to work with a drama queen, a diva. These are all very important lessons that I learned on the sets of Hippo and Friends way back in 94, 95. I was just happy to, and it gave me a lot of independence, Like, if I'm not wrong, it was $50 an episode, and I would save up that money. I feel like that also shaped another core value for me, because every time it was somebody's birthday, I would use my savings to buy my mum a birthday present or buy my dad a birthday present. I saved up to buy my first mobile phone when I went to secondary school. It was the Nokia 8310, which at the time was a state-of-the-art mobile phone, because it was the only mobile phone that had a radio function in it. This was like before MP3 and Spotify and all that. I felt so proud of myself because I'd been saving up for years. Having this paid work gave me some independence. And the core value that it shaped was I like taking care of the people that I love, and I like being able to provide for them. I feel like that has been a through line for me throughout my life.
My career began working adjacent to Bollywood in the world of ad filmmaking in Mumbai. And in that world, child actors often carried more than just their own dreams. They were sometimes the sole breadwinners, pushed by families hoping for a better, more glamorous life. Kid moms, as we called them, could be terrifying, pushing their children hard, fighting for every audition, every extra second on screen. Maybe that's why I love Sindhu's stories so much, because when you listen to her, you realize learning her lines, showing up on set, being part of something bigger than herself was never really just about acting. They were values being quietly planted in her to show up, to care about others. Lessons that stayed with her long after the camera stopped rolling. The 90s were a simpler time, but not necessarily a more sensitive one. And there was a small role Sindhu took on back then that years later would leave her with a very different feeling.
I did one Mandarin movie at the age of 10 called Liang Popo, which is a very problematic movie. They were looking for a small Indian girl to be in this movie. I don't think I had to audition for the role, because really they just needed any Indian girl, right? Because I had one speaking line, and eventually that line was also dubbed over. So this is the problematic bit. Liang Popo is this very beloved TV character where Jack Neo cross-dresses to play this grandma character called Liang Popo. And Liang Popo had like TV show, there were movies, and everybody loved Liang Popo, okay, in the 90s. In this movie, Liang Popo gets into trouble with some loan sharks and is trying to hide from them. And so here comes the little Indian girl's key part in the movie. Liang Popo is trying to run away from the loan sharks and chances upon these three children, little Indian girl plus two Chinese boys, who are playing in some back alley somewhere. And they're like, "Oh, Liang Popo, why are you running away? Are you okay?" And Liang Popo says that, "Yeah, the loan sharks are after me. I need to run away from them." And my only speaking line is, I got an idea. Cut to next scene. Indian music, like the stock Veena music, sitar music. And Liang Popo walks out in brownface, in a sari. And the loan sharks cannot find her anymore because they mistake her to be an Indian woman. If I'm not wrong, in the film, she even says in this horrible, horrible accent, right? Vanakkam, like that kind of, oh my God, it's so problematic, I tell you. But times were different back then. I don't think I fully registered it as a child. Maybe not even my mom, because we just did not have the language for it. We weren't able to articulate it. We just accepted it. Many, many years later, I think it was 2020, COVID year, for National Day on Netflix, they had a season of Singapore favorites. And one of these films was Liang Po Po. I remember thinking, I am no longer a clueless 10-year-old. I am like a 30-something-year-old with a mouth, with opinions now. And I don't think that it should be part of this season on Netflix. I get it, it was made back then, but there's no reason to celebrate it now, especially because there's such a problematic portrayal of a brown person in this film. I just posted things and I tagged Jack Neo, who never replied, and Netflix. And I said, hey, I am that girl in this film, right? By the way, for the credits of this film, they misspelled my name. Sindhura Kalidas became Sindhura Kakidas. So it just goes to show the level of care, right? Yeah, anyway, I was just unhappy and I decided to make some noise about it. I'm not sure what exactly happened. I think maybe it gained some traction and other people with louder voices or more power and influence were able to get Netflix Singapore's attention and they removed it from that particular series. So that's a big win, I think. It's not just about me, right? In 2020, what is it that we are considering to be Singaporean narratives? What is it that we are considering to be Singapore stories that are worth celebrating? Let's have a discussion, right?
What and who Singapore chooses to celebrate says a lot about us. In our media, ads, films, everyday conversations, the majority race gets to be complex. They're shown as full people with different lives, personalities, and stories. In stark contrast, Indians and Malays, brown people, are frequently reduced to visual shorthand and cultural stereotypes. Here's an example. Grab's recent Women's Day advertisement, "The Most Boring Ride Ever," perfectly demonstrates this disparity. The idea was powerful, a montage of women peacefully asleep in the backseat, celebrating rides so uneventful, so safe that they're, boring. Throughout the commercial, Chinese women appear in diverse, realistic contexts, wearing a casual t-shirt, a sparkly party dress, professional office attire, and even a creative cosplay outfit. Yet when the Malay woman appears, she's limited to a simple brown tudung, nothing more to her story. Similarly, the Indian woman is dressed in a bright green kurta, complete with a matching bag, exaggerated large earrings, and a bindi. Unlike her Chinese counterparts, she isn't shown in modern party clothes, work attire, or anything suggesting a multidimensional life beyond her ethnicity. She's reduced to wearing not clothing, but a costume, an Indian costume. And then, of course, the Diwali ads. You know the ones. A glowing family gathered around a plate of muruku. Either they made it, fought to find it, or they hosted a full-blown muruku-making block party that involved everybody. Now, obviously, not every ad is like that. But when you keep seeing yourself framed like that, smiling, snack in hand, you start to wonder, when do we get to be something more layered than a family portrayed with deep-fried carbs? I admit, I'm exaggerating, mostly for laughs, but it's a point I felt strongly enough about to stop Sindhu mid-recording and go off on a mini rant.
I work in advertising. If I have to see one more Indian family making muruku Diwali, I'm just going to.
I know.
I'm just like, you think this is all
we do? Make muruku, right?
We
Yeah.
just sit and make muruku and then we make pineapple tart and therefore, I don't know, national unity or something and all good now.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's so good that we can laugh about these things. And I'm really happy that life gave Sindhu that moment, a chance to go back and right a wrong. At this point, I want to go back, and I asked Sindhu about her earliest memory.
My first memory. Wow. Okay. Let me think. I feel like I was the kind of kid who was a bit unhinged. I had a lot of energy and I was a very dramatic child from the very beginning. I have this memory of just following my mom around the house. I must have been about two didn't know very many words, and I'm just demanding to be carried. So my mom still makes fun of me for this. I'll just walk around going, carry me, and then get more and more demanding as she ignored me. Carry me, carry me, carry me now, carry me now, carry me now. Yeah, very insistent and dramatic from the get-go. I'm the younger of two girls. So my sister is 12 and a half years older than me. I was born very late in my parents' marriage. The question that always gets asked every time I tell somebody that my sister is 12 and a half years older than me, close to 13 years older than me, they always say, were you an accident? Very funny. But actually, the truth is the complete opposite. I was a very planned child. I think my parents were done with my sister actually. So they had her almost immediately after they got married. And they were happy, the three of them, little family on their own. But it was my sister who wanted a companion because she started feeling lonely, I think, from the time she was like 6, 7 years old. She started asking my parents for a sibling, and my mom would say things like, if you have a younger brother or sister, you have to share everything. You have to share your clothes, you have to share your room. If I buy you a plate of noodles, you have to share the noodles. Can you share? And then my sister would be like, no, I don't want to share. So apparently this kept going on for a couple of years until my sister was about 11 or 12, and she went to my parents in tears and she said, look, I'm ready to share. Please give me a sibling. So yeah, that's how I came into existence. We're actually very close. I used to follow her everywhere. My parents would have to distract me while she was going out with her friends because she was a teenager, right? She was 17, 18. I'm 5 years old and insisting on going everywhere with my sister, and she just wants to go out on a date with her boyfriend. But yeah, my mom would have to distract me so my sister could go out. And my sister taught me everything I knew about music, movies, pop culture. Now I feel the roles have reversed a little bit because she's at that stage where sometimes she will call me for advice. What do you think I should do? Hey, can you help me? Or what clothes should I wear? So it's a very nice full circle sort of relationship. And I'm very grateful for her presence in my life.
These memories of sisterhood naturally lead me to think about her mother. I asked Sindhu, what was her mother like?
My mom comes from like a very feisty family, very like matriarchal family almost, right? All of her sisters are chili paddies in their own right. My mom is a formidable woman. She gets things done and she runs a tight ship at home. My dad is the complete opposite. He's super chill and laid back. I feel like they were very forward thinking for their time. They were very open minded about things. They never gave us pressure to do certain things or behave a certain way. If anything, they always encouraged us to speak up, to form our own opinions on things. Don't just blindly follow what other people are saying. Don't just blindly regurgitate what you read in the papers. They were very big on that. I came from a very loving household. I know that my parents love each other. My dad is very open and vocal about it. During my wedding speech, that was something that I mentioned in the speech, that if you meet my parents, you will have absolutely no doubt how much my father adores my mother. After all these years, he still thinks she's the most beautiful woman in the room, in the world.
In many South Indian families, love is something you find between the lines. It's rarely physical. It's not loud. It doesn't always come in words you can hold on to. Instead, it shows up in smaller ways. A teasing nudge instead of a hug. A plate of peeled cut fruit left quietly on the table. A coconut bun picked up from the bakery, carried home without a word. Love needs to be searched for, decoded, understood through gestures more than declarations. You grow up learning to recognize it in what's unsaid, what's offered without explanation. And that's why hearing Sindhu speak about her family moved me so deeply. The idea that in her home, love wasn't something you had to hunt for, that you had to decode. It was open, loud even.
I think that is my mom's role in this dynamic. Because my dad lost his mother when he was 4 years old. He didn't have that growing up. He didn't have a mother's love. He didn't have that softness in him, even though he had two elder sisters. But according to him, they never said those things. They never said, I love you. They showed it in different ways. They provided for each other. They checked in on each other in different ways. But he said, I was never tuned into my emotions. Even if you talk to him about his childhood, and he lived through the war, the Japanese occupation. And if you ask him, how do you feel about certain things? Or if your dad was working all the time, did you miss him? And he will just very honestly tell you, no, I had no time, or I did not have the capacity to think about my emotions in that way. But everything changed after I met your mother. And I realized that she came from this family unit that had a very strong infrastructure already. And when my parents got married, my dad was a police officer, some context. My mom used to say that when they had my sister, he would be very, very strict, and he was a disciplinarian. And it was my mom who had to tell him, this is a home. This is not the police force. This is not a police academy. And you've got a daughter. So you need to bear that in mind, right? You need to try and connect with her. You can't just treat her like one of your recruits, because she's going to resent you for it. And that's when my dad realized, there's all of these things that I need to consider. And now, even today, we are very vocal about it. We say, I love you every day. We used to have something called like breakfast kisses. My parents would be like, I don't need anything for breakfast. All I need is a kiss from you, our breakfast kisses. Every morning and every night, my parents will say good morning and good night to each other. So these are all little rituals that I never thought much of as a child. But now growing up, I realize how important they were to my own understanding of love and family. It's really informed the kind of person that I am and I want to be. My family, especially on my mom's side, is very chapalang. That means we come from all over. Heritage-wise, my mom's dad is Telugu. So he came from Andhra Pradesh. And my mom's mom has Chetty Malacca heritage. So they're like Malay, Peranakan. So that side of the family, the food is a bit different. The traditions are a little bit different. The language they speak, they code switch between Tamil, Malay, and English very seamlessly. And my aunts married non-Indians. My uncle as well married a non-Indian. So we celebrate Chinese New Year, we celebrate Hari Raya, we celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Deepavali. All of these festivals brought great joy to the extended family.
During our first chat, Sindhu had shared a beautiful story about her grandmother. I asked her about it again, hoping to hear more, to dive deeper into the story that stayed with me.
My grandmother got married quite young, I believe, 15, 16, I believe. And she got married to my granddad, who was much older than her. And she was a very beautiful woman. Lovely, lovely, lovely. You never have met someone like my grandma. Maybe everybody says that about their grandma. There was just something about my grandma who was so soft-spoken and lovely. Not just the soft-spoken thing. No, okay, I take that back. It was that she was so kind. She was so compassionate. She was so generous. Always, always. Even when she had nothing, she would find a way to bring joy to other people. And I don't know, maybe my grandfather, especially in those days, right? Maybe he was a little bit protective over her. And he had 5 daughters and 1 son. So he was a very protective man. He wouldn't let my grandma or my aunts wear makeup. You can't leave the house. You've got to dress a certain way. My mother told me this story where they would have to resort to getting red M&Ms and rubbing it on their lips because they weren't allowed to have lipstick. I sometimes wonder if that influenced my mom and her sisters, right? The way they saw the dynamic between their parents. Because like I said earlier, they're all very feisty, very opinionated. Yeah. And which is a complete opposite of my grandmother. And yeah, maybe that had a bearing on the way that they grew up as women as well. And by that time, tides were shifting, right? They were young women in the late 60s and early 70s. There was a lot more talk about feminist thought and feminist behavior and what it means. And I see these pictures of my mom and my aunts in the 70s wearing these like quite sexy saris, like almost completely see-through. And I'm like, wow, very fashion forward. And I sometimes tease them. I'm like, I can see right through this sari. You're very brave to wear this kind of sari. It's like, yeah, because we never had the chance to experiment when we were younger. That in our 20s, we just decided we were going to go for it. And that's quite interesting.
I've always noticed how Indian women of earlier generations rebel, not loudly, but in small, quiet ways. It's there in the size of a sari blouse, cut just a little bit bolder than expected. It's there in a mother supporting a marriage that falls outside tradition, quietly, steadfastly, standing up for her child. In a newlywed woman running a business from home, without fanfare, without a LinkedIn page, simply wanting to give her family more. Indian women have always found ways to stand up for themselves. And it's through these quiet rebellions, almost invisible at times, that the next generation, women like Sindhu's mother, could be fiery, opinionated, and unapologetically bold.
My father's side, I think, is a little more conservative than my mother's side. I don't mean that in a bad way. My father's side is more Indian, but like, for instance, like languages spoken, right? My mother's side is primarily English. Of course, we code switch English and Tamil as well. On my dad's side, I would say primarily Tamil. My memory of it as a child is that we would have to go there and speak Tamil. Maybe because there were a lot of Tamil teachers on that side of the family. And my father's Tamil is amazing as well. After retirement, he did a lot of English to Tamil and Tamil to English translation. He worked with the courts and Ministry of Manpower. Yeah, because he's very, very effectively bilingual. But that was maybe the perception that I had of my father's side of the family, which is interesting because they're not fully Tamil. My dad's dad came from Kerala, and I never met him, but apparently he could barely speak Tamil. He spoke Malayalam, or he spoke Tamil with a very, very, very heavy Malayali accent. So I've asked my dad this, how come you guys never picked up Malayalam? How come you can't speak it? And my dad says, I must have known when I was a kid, but no practice, so we forgot. And because of like the policies at that time, they just studied Tamil and ran with it. And my dad's elder sister became a Tamil teacher, and a lot of people on my dad's side of the family became Tamil teachers. My paternal grandfather did come from a small village in Kerala called Vadakeppat. Many, many years later, my sister and my cousin on my dad's side would track down his roots. They found some old letters that my grandfather had written to his sister. They used the address that was on the envelope. They went back to this village and they found our relatives there. So that's quite an interesting story about tracing roots.
Listening to Sindhu, I realize how important this connection to her history is. It's part of her sense of identity, a foundation that would later inform her exploration of identity and belonging in theatre. Let's now return to her journey in theatre. She was active in drama throughout school and went on to study theatre studies at university. Though her program at NUS was academic, it gave her a deeper theoretical understanding of theatre. After graduating, she freelanced briefly, but quickly realized that it wasn't a sustainable path for her at the time.
I decided to go get a full-time job. Like I said, the core value that was shaped all those years earlier about, okay, now is my time to be there for my family and also, just support my parents who are now getting on in life. My priorities shifted a little bit. My passion shifted a little bit. I was an English and literature teacher at a private enrichment center. I joined the enrichment center thinking, okay, there's no bond here, right? But it's 3 months notice and then I go off and I do whatever I want. But life has a funny way of just lifing. And 2 years became 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's not to say that I didn't find fulfillment in that job. I come from a family of very dedicated teachers. That is the greatest performance of all, right? Because the kids don't care if your boyfriend broke up with you or your family member has an illness or your pet died. When you open that classroom door and you walk into the class, they deserve you at your best.
Like many of us, the desire for change came during COVID. It was a time when everything shifted, not just in the world, but within us. For Sindhu, it was a moment to reassess, to think about what she truly wanted.
To go back to 2020, which is 9 years in this job, COVID year, where we were all stuck in our houses with nothing to do but think and reflect on our lives and what we were doing with it, I decided to make that leap. I paid my dues, I kept my head down, I grit my teeth, and I did this job for 9 years. I really think it's now or never. I just felt that feeling that it was going to be now or never. That was also around the time that people were talking about dramaturgy more. And that's also when I started learning more about it. I thought, okay, dramaturgy seems like a logical progression for me.
Okay, here it is, that big word, dramaturgy. I have to ask Sindhu, what does it mean?
Funny story, when I went off to do my master's, I did an MA in dramaturgy in writing and performance in the UK, in London. We would start off every lesson with our professor going, "What is dramaturgy?" And I tell you, by the 5th or 6th time, I was so frustrated. Lady, I've paid a lot of money to come here and find out. You better tell me by the end of this course. Okay, but jokes aside, the analogy that I like to use is in business, they have these like consultancies, right? You have your Bain, your McKinsey, whatever. They come in and they help businesses achieve their business objectives, whatever those objectives may be. Like, I need to make my profit margin bigger, or I need to downsize this department. The dramaturg plays a sort of similar role in the arts industry. So the dramaturg will assist the creatives to achieve their creative objectives. The creative objectives could be anything, could be script related, could be something more production related. And therefore, the dramaturg is like a Swiss Army knife kind of person, right? Depending on the needs of the project, you assist and support and be a critical ally to the creative team to help them achieve whatever creative aims they have. I might take a look at the script and then we might talk through the script, or if you're okay with me talking to the playwright, we'll see where that comes through in the script and what kind of suggestions I might be able to make to clarify that narrative. Or I may talk to you about your casting decisions, things like that. I look at character journeys and I think a lot about character motivations and intentions. And I think a lot about the actor because I've been in that situation as well. What kind of feedback does the actor need, right? And how can we refine the feedback and clarify the feedback in a way that the actor is able to absorb it and act on it? My first job when I came back, I think was probably Acting Mad by The Necessary Stage. This was a restaging of a play that had already been staged a couple of years earlier, but Harish Sharma, the playwright, wanted to update it. It was a verbatim play about mental health issues within the theatre industry. He had new interviews that he wanted to integrate, and there were some different things that he wanted to try. He very generously let me come on board to be a dramaturg. And the next big project that I got was to be series dramaturg for Playtime, which is an Esplanade series for 3 to 6-year-olds. So Playtime was great. Wonderful learning experience. It was very fulfilling.
There's a play that kept coming up in my research, Psychobitch. What a name, right? I had to ask Sindhu about it.
The first version was a dramatized read as part of Playwrights Cove, which I did. And then the following year, it got a full production at Wildress. Oh, that was really a baptism of fire because, yes, I'd been acting, but I'd never done this kind of acting. I'd never been in a one-woman show. It's about this character called Anya Samuel, and she's an overachieving journalist. The premise is she is tasked by her tech CEO boyfriend to explain the 4 times she cried in public. Yeah, that's it. Crazy premise, but actually happened to the playwright in real life, who is my friend from secondary school, Amanda Chong. She wrote it with me in mind. I remember telling her, Amanda, I'm very touched that you had me in mind for this role, but really no hard feelings if you wanted to go with somebody else, like a better actor. I don't know, I was so scared. Just because, maybe it was that little birdie in my head that kept saying, you have no formal training. You don't know how to warm up. You don't know how to be to do a one-woman show. I don't know. So honestly, that entire prep and process now seems like such a blur. I don't know how I did it. It was really tough, but it was really nice to see how well received it was by not just women, but by men as well, who would come up to me after the show and say, hey, I feel so seen. It was very relatable. And I know if it's not me, I know friends like this.
At the heart of Psychobitch is a theme that doesn't get talked about enough: female emotionalism. And in this play, it's seen through the lens of an ambitious brown woman.
Yes, and also female emotionalism. This is beyond race. It's more gender related, I feel. It's that when women get emotional, we get called psycho. She's a psycho bitch. Oh my God. Is she PMSing? Something that I have been asked a lot. PMS by students also, right? If you're in a bad mood. How come these standards don't apply to men? When men get emotional, it usually, what does that look like?
It's passion.
They're considered passionate, but when women get emotional, we're psycho. So that was a very interesting conversation that it sparked, I think, which was fulfilling. We had very, very young women also. There was a woman in tears at the end of one performance because I think she was in a toxic relationship. She could barely get the words out of her mouth. She was just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing, and she just kept saying, "You gave me a lot to think about. I think I deserve better." It's the power of theatre, particularly, I think, because it's a very visual medium as well. Not just visual, but because you're sharing a space with hundreds of other people. It's a communal experience, which is so special. And absolutely right, the power of stories to show you other ways of living. You don't always have to relate to the characters that you see on stage. I sometimes see characters and I dislike them. And I don't think that everybody had to like this character that I was playing as well. As long as there's a question that is raised, or you feel like, hey, I can be all of these things, or that the character is imperfect, right? And that's something that I carry forward from being a teacher. And I used to teach literature, right? So sometimes we study prose or we study poetry, and the kids are like, wow, this character is damn stupid. Okay. One of the first things that I say is don't judge the character, because as soon as you do that, you're closed off, right? If you think the character is stupid, then why do you think the character is saying all of these inconsistent things? Why do you think the character is behaving in this way? Try to put yourself in the character's shoes, and it may be stupid to you, but clearly in that moment, the character does not think it is a stupid thing to do. So then what compels a person to do these sorts of things? And that's essentially empathetic thinking, isn't it? When you're like, it doesn't make sense to me, but then why? Why would a person do something like that? And I think that when we create these characters, we want to start such conversations, right? It's juicy when my character is complex, is imperfect, right? So even Anya, for instance, she calls herself a feminist, but she says some unfeminist things. And a lot of women I know are also like that. We have our failings, we have our weaknesses, we have our inconsistencies, and that's where the magic lies.
In the play, Anya, the main character, has a Chinese boyfriend. It's a small detail, but it matters. It shapes how people see her.
Interracial relationships happen. And it just was the case for this character as well. For brown women who date maybe outside of their own race, there may be so many factors that informs their decision-making process. It doesn't always mean that if you date outside of your own race, you're trying to run away from something.
Sometimes the guys are just hot.
Or they're kind, or they're compassionate, or whatever. And sometimes it's a numbers game. Like maybe it's who is willing and able, right, to date. I think it's very lazy identity politics to think that to date outside your race, you must be running away from something, or you're selling out, or you're not in touch with your own race.
I've been reading about interracial relationships in Singapore, and one story really stuck with me. An interracial couple was harassed on Orchard Road by a man later identified as a lecturer who accused the other man of stealing our Chinese girls. The man being targeted was Dave Prakash, who is Indian Filipino. He responded calmly and clearly, but what struck me most was what he said right at the beginning. I'm not even fully Indian. That line stayed with me. Why? Because I know that instinct, the urge to soften your Indian identity. Not because you're ashamed, but because sometimes being too Indian can come at a cost. Yes, there's always questions about cultural and traditional values when Indians date outside their race. But this incident showed something deeper, the quiet pressure to downplay important parts of who we are just to fit in, to simply make life a little less complicated. It made me think we really need to talk more openly about interracial relationships and the invisible lines about identity and belonging that so many of us learn to tiptoe around.
I think Psychobitch was one of those plays that it had a life of its own. Nobody could have expected how this was going to go, least of all me. I was just caught by surprise, really, at how well received it was. I think that says something about, the power of stories and the number of people who found themselves in such situations, right? Young women who had been accused of being too emotional, who also found themselves like being very successful in their own right, ambitious, and then still being in relationships where there was some gendered expectations of them that they found themselves playing into. And then that really messes with your mind as well, because you're like, oh, then who am I? What are my values? What am I selling? I'm selling out then. And maybe going to this play gave them an outlet to just filter all these thoughts or connect all the dots and find a place where they could just sit and say, it's okay. It's okay to be both of these things or all of these things. I don't think the play gave any answers, but it also had a very strong family narrative that unconditional love does exist. I think for a lot of people, we find ourselves in unfulfilling relationships because maybe deep within ourselves we feel unlovable, right? But that can't be true. Surely there's at least one person that loves you in some shape or form. It could be a friend, could be a sibling, could be a family member, could be a romantic relationship, right? I think it started a lot of conversation about what love is and what it looks like, what it can look like, what it shouldn't look like. That was the most powerful thing about that piece, I feel.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, that sounds really important. Yeah. I had to do a lot of therapy to study.
This lesson that love comes in all forms took me a long while to work out. I think we're taught what love should look like. You know, perfect families, siblings who have always had your back, childhood friends who stay with you forever. And because that's what I thought love had to be, I missed a lot. Love was there, just not in the ways I expected. It didn't look like the movies. It didn't sound like the stories I grew up reading. And because it didn't fit the picture I had in my head, I often didn't recognize it. I didn't know how to hold on to it. The truth is that love doesn't always look like love. Sometimes it's the teacher who notices your talent, or it's a friend you barely talk to, except on your birthday, every single year without fail. The older I get, the more I have started to notice the quieter kinds of love, the ones that are not traditional, but stay with you anyway. I asked Sindhu about another of her plays, another play with an amazing title, Happy Indian Women.
The precursor to Happy Indian Women was this devising exploratory platform workshop that we did with Harish Sharma. He wanted to use the Aware anthology, What We Inherit. Yeah, I'm forgetting the actual title.
What We Inherit Growing Up Indian. That's the name of the book. It was one of the first I picked up when I started researching for this podcast, and it had a massive impact on me and on the topics I've come to explore here. The book brings together 38 personal essays and poems by Indian women and a few men living in Singapore. Through stories of identity, family, gender, and belonging, it paints a picture that feels both deeply personal to the authors, but also incredibly familiar because so many of us have carried these questions and stories quietly for a long time. It's divided into 5 parts: what we inherit, what we endure, what we speak, how we identify, and how we find joy. Each section opens up conversations that are both difficult and tender about intergenerational trauma, colorism, menstruation, migration, and the struggle to belong in a place that doesn't always see you clearly and completely. The voices in this collection are honest, powerful, and unafraid. What we inherit isn't about growing up Indian in the model minority way that's expected of us. It's about how we actually grow up, messy, uncertain, full of questions, and still finding moments of love, identity, belonging along the way.
We got together a group of creatives from all walks of life, including Ruby J. Seelan, who was one of your previous guests. So we were movement artists, filmmaker, actors, a classical singer, all sorts of people from various creative backgrounds came together, used the stories in the anthology as a starting point for discussion. We just played to see how we responded to these texts, how we would generate new texts. That anthology is really very beautiful because so many of us resonated with so many stories in there, but it also got me thinking, we still have so many more stories to tell.
Shaped by these experiences and working with the necessary stage, Sindhu decided to create a verbatim play. The project became part theatrical production, part anthropological study, with 2 wonderful researchers helping her gather interviews, transcribe them, and weave the stories together. They stayed creative, trying to honor the voices they collected. But through it all, one thing they kept searching for was brown joy.
I was also interested in this idea of brown joy, right? There's a lot of narratives about hardship, about how difficult it is. And I wanted a counterpoint to that, actually, what brings us joy, what brings us together. When I went out to start the interviews, there was a little bit of that, but I also realized that there was still so much we wanted to get out of our systems. So yes, I will tell you the things that bring me joy, but actually I also want to talk about this thing that happened to me in primary school that I'm still so angry about and I'm resentful towards this person. And the stories just kept coming. And that's when I realized that Happy Indian Women, the title was less of a summary and more of a provocation, right, for where we are today. I would still love to do like a Happy Indian Women version 2.0, 5 years, 6 years from now. And I hope that we will have more joyful things to share. We must.
So I have to admit, I've stolen your brown joy phrase a lot to summarize some of what I want to do with the podcast.
It's fantastic.
But I think, at least from what I'm experiencing,
I continue to share with Sindhu my thoughts on the absence of brown joy. In our community, joy isn't absent. It's simply eclipsed by pain's persistent shadow, because our pain is rarely spoken about, rarely given a platform. When we finally get the chance to speak, we feel compelled to testify to our wounds first. This happens because we're rarely given the spotlight. When we finally get it, we prioritize our wounds over our celebrations. We decide to document what's broken in our lives, rarely what's beautiful. I also talked to her about the 1,000 ways in which I feel that we're flattened, reduced to so many tropes.
One Indian character who's forced to have an accent
And make murukku.
and make muraku and all of that.
Yeah.
So there is this just desire, I think, for those stories to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think the joy element is such an important counterpoint to the stories that already exist. It's something that I've said before, that actually joy is the most radical act. To feel joy and to experience joy in spaces and under systems that don't want you to feel that. They want to maybe keep you in your place. They want to oppress you, right? Because it makes things easier for these systems to operate the way they have always operated. That's why, to me, that joy is very, very important.
Sindhu's journey in acting has definitely evolved from being cast as Hippo's token Indian friend to creating a verbatim play that centers the voices of brown women. That's a huge leap. But her story is just one thread. What about the industry as a whole? Has Singapore's theatre world truly made space for more than just token representation?
I think the industry is definitely changing. We're at an interesting point now where it's almost like a transitory phase where a lot of theatre companies are now starting to think about new ways of doing things, essentially succession, right? And longevity. So maybe a theatre company has been run a certain way for the last 30, 40 years, but how do we bring it into the new era, and how do we make space for younger practitioners also to come into the fold? So that's why we're at this sort of transitional phase, which is quite interesting, because I feel that's why there's a bit more space now for different perspectives and different voices to be platformed. Whereas this was less of the case maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago. And it very much felt like it depends on who you know. Whereas now it seems a bit more open to new and fresh blood. I hope this brings good things for the industry, just by virtue of the fact that different people are going to be bringing in different energy with them into spaces, different ways of thinking, different ways of doing things. And I honestly think we should have more of that. The only reason that I'm here is because people took a chance on me. I feel like we need to take chances on people that maybe they don't have the kind of training that we're looking for, but they have an interesting way of thinking about things. They have the right attitude. They may not have the training, but they're willing to do the work. And let's see where those kinds of collaborations take us. Now we have the vocabulary to talk about sensitive things in a way that we weren't able to 5, 10 years ago. So I'm interested to see where that takes us as well. As an industry, I think we're less afraid to, just be different and to talk about the difficult things. I think theatre has always been that almost transgressive space. I work very closely with The Necessary Stage, and they have a very long and colorful history as well. They were investigated or accused of being Marxist ideology. Yeah, Marxist. And they were called in for questioning and things like that because of their affiliation with another theatre company as well. And one of the tools that they use in theatre is forum theatre, which was developed by a practitioner called Augusto Boal, a Brazilian theatre practitioner, and which was banned in Singapore for a very, very long time. The way forum theatre works is you basically invite members of the audience to step into the roles of certain characters to see how a conflict can be explored. I don't want to say resolved because it doesn't always end in resolution. Often the conflicts that are portrayed in the anti-model, the play part of this form theatre, it's called the anti-model because it ends in a non-ideal way, right? Because there's conflict. So usually it ends with some kind of escalation, and then that's when you invite members of the audience to come in and, okay, how can we explore the situation further? And usually there is an oppressor and oppressed individual in this conflict. It was used as a form of political theatre. So you can see why it would be frowned upon in Singapore and was banned for many years. Theatre companies have never shied away from talking about the difficult, sensitive topics. It's always about social consciousness, being socially aware, sometimes very controversial takes on characters. The industry has always been pushing the envelope, but I feel like now we are in a situation where we can push the envelope a little bit more. Unfortunately, in a place like Singapore, if you want to stage a play, it still has to go through IMDA. You have to get a license to put on the play. It's about thinking of creative ways, right, to make sure your play gets a rating. Because if they don't give you a rating, they don't give you a license, you can't stage the play. Yeah, creative ways to talk about the things that you want to talk about, but in different ways, in different forms.
After everything she's seen, the auditions, the token roles, the moments of real artistic power, I want to know, what would Sindhu say to a young girl today, one who dreams of being on stage?
A young girl came up to me and she said, I love acting, but is it a sustainable career path? My parents don't seem to think so, and I just feel like I don't know what to do with my life. Wow, I felt so much pressure in that moment because I'm like, what do I tell this kid? And I just thought about it as, okay, when I was 17, what would I have liked to hear from somebody? And I said to her, life is very, very unpredictable. It will throw you a lot of curveballs. I would say don't necessarily feel pressured about receiving formal training. It's just figuring out for yourself how you think you may be able to contribute. When you say you want to work in theatre, what is it that you want to do? Do you want to act? Do you want to direct? Do you want to write? There's so many different ways to contribute to the industry. And there's so many other roles that we don't think about as well. I feel like in this sort of capitalist society, the bulk of our fulfillment or our purpose, the perception is that it needs to come from a job. It needs to come from what we do for a living, right? And yes, maybe you get a lot of pride and fulfillment and purpose from being a doctor or a theatre practitioner or whatever it is, lawyer, whatever it is that you do, but that's not the only thing that you are. And if it hasn't revealed itself to you, it's okay. Yes, I'm a theatre practitioner, I'm an actor, but I'm also a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a wife, I'm a friend. I'm so many things, and I can get that sense of purpose and fulfillment from these other roles in my life as well. It's quite dangerous, I think, personally, I feel, if you derive fulfillment and purpose from only your job, because then if something goes wrong there, everything goes off kilter, and it can breed some very unhealthy attitudes, resentment towards other people, competition, right? Why didn't I get this? I should have gotten this. But if you're able to take a step back, this is just one thing that I do. There's so many other parts of me, and there's so many other aspects of me that make me me.
This advice is a true reflection of Sindhu's humble nature, grounded, thoughtful, and always generous. So I ask her, beyond the roles, beyond the applause, what has theatre given her in return?
I think it has definitely given me joy. It has given me humility. It has given me internal fortitude, because you have to have a very thick skin to work in the arts. You walk into audition rooms and get rejected for things you have no control over because people are going for a different vibe or a different look. and I can't change my vibe or I can't change my look. So you have to have a very thick skin. I think it has also given me critical kindness because I know how hard it is to put out a work of art, to work on something for so long. And yes, sometimes we watch things and we don't like it, we don't vibe with it. But then you try and think about, okay, what is it that got them there? What is it that they were intending to do? Two things that my mother has told me that have always stuck with me throughout my life. Number one was my first day of kindergarten. And she told me, don't let anyone bully you. If anything happens, you speak up or you come and tell me. And that idea of don't let anybody bully you was a really important thing for me. That idea of speaking up for yourself is okay. It's so important for, I think, young brown girls. And the second thing was my mom told me, look, I don't care where you go to university. I don't care where you go to school. I don't care if you get your bachelor's, your master's, your PhD, wherever. You can have a whole list of alphabets after your name. But if you are arrogant, if you are unkind, and if people start saying Sindhu is not good to work with or she's such a horrible person, then take all those certificates and flush them down the toilet bowl. They mean nothing, right? Remember the value. That's what makes you you. It's not these qualifications. At the end of the day, you think about what your values are. You think about what makes you you, and that should be what is guiding you through life. And that has really shaped me a lot because no matter what I do, what my profession is, when I was a teacher or now that I'm a theatre practitioner, I'm totally okay if people say Sindhu is a bad actress or Sindhu is a bad writer, Sindhu is a bad teacher. I'm willing to take it and I'm willing to learn from that. But if people say, oh, Sindhu's terrible to work with, Sindhu's not a good person, I think that would really break me. So I'd much rather be a nice person to work with, coming in with the right attitude, but maybe not the best at being an actor, or being a writer, or being a director. I'm willing to take that. Okay, because those are things that I can work on. I think for me, the only thing that I strive to be is just a decent person. Just don't be a dick.
Just don't be a dick. I love that. That's a great place to end this episode.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rani. I hope I've given you enough to work with.
It's fabulous. Thank you so much. It was really great.
I've loved this conversation with Sindhu. From watching clips of the very purple hippo to hearing about a family of fiery, fearless women, she's shown me that brown joy is alive and well. Through her heartwarming stories about her parents, about breakfast kisses and quiet rituals, she's reminded me that brown love, family love, doesn't always have to be searched for or decoded. Sometimes it's right there, steady, open, clear. In her soft humility, she's proven that it's values, not titles or work, that define who we are, that kindness, decency, and goodness are what remain even if we explore hard topics, from psychobitches to angry brown women. This life built on strong values and an open heart has been an inspiration to me. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Brown Box. Please do tune in next time for another brown story. And until then, I hope you'll keep searching for more and more brown joy. And I hope wherever you are that you find it.